Good afternoon, everyone. See, we have a big crowd today. I'm happy to see a lot of Manila House members here in the audience and friends of León Gallery and AI. I'd like to welcome all of you today on behalf of Manila House. I'm Bambina Olivares. I'm the Director of Programming for the Arts and Culture events of Manila House. And today, talking about investing in art during a pandemic. This is presented in partnership with León Gallery, and we have with us today Jaime Ponce de León himself, and Toñico Manahan, who will be giving a very enthralling presentation in a minute. Now, before I introduce our panelists in their depth, I just wanted to say that we all know how the art market has changed during the pandemic. You know how the galleries and museums have closed, or they're reopening now by appointment only, but sales of art have not been flat, as Toñico and Jaime will attest to later on. So what is happening and how is art being marketed and sold in a virtual world? So to talk more about this, we have Toñico Manahan with us. And for those of you who don't know, I think you might know him as Attorney Manahan, but he is a practicing lawyer, a former investment banker whose parents infected him with the disease of collecting art. He graduated with a Juris Doctor degree from the Ateneo de Manila University School of Law in 1993. He completed his undergraduate work at the Ateneo de Manila University, majoring in legal management. From the year 2007 to the year 2010, while maintaining an independent legal practice, he worked as vice president for merchant banking for Philippine Commercial Capital, Inc., one of the longest tenured investment houses in the Philippines. He left PCCI in order to focus on his practice, and he is an advisor to León Gallery. León Gallery, I'm sure it doesn't need much of an introduction, as you're all familiar with it. And just before I proceed, just to let you know that León Gallery has its magnificent September auction this Saturday. Starting what time, Jaime?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. It's going to be a hybrid hybrid format, which Toñico and Jaime will explain a bit more. But León Gallery, just for those who don't know, first opened its doors in 2010, quickly gaining a reputation for specializing in museum quality and historically important Philippine art. It is also a purveyor of meticulously selected Philippine antiques, dating from the pre-Spanish period to the 19th century. There's antique furniture, Spanish Filipino ivory and silver, precious oriental ceramic and porcelain, rare carpets and jewelry constitute the gallery's special heirloom and estate pieces. At the core of León Gallery's expertise are works of Filipino old masters such as Juan Luna y Novicio, Felix Resurrección Hidalgo y Padilla, Fabián de la Rosa y Cueto, and Fernando Amorsole y Cueto. The gallery has gone on to widen its field with the works of the 13 moderns, including Carlos Botong Francisco, Anita Magsaysayho, Fernando Ocampo, and Vicente Manansala, as well as leading lights such as Fernando Sobel, Arturo Luz, Federico Aguilar Alcuaz, to name a few. León Gallery is also honored to offer almost all of the Philippines' national artists for the visual arts and sculpture, as well as the most exciting and contemporary artists. So now that I've set the scene and you know who's actually speaking today, they're heavyweights. I mean, Toñico likes to say that he's just a spectator, but he's actually quite the scholar about Philippine art and the business of art. So I'm gonna pass you over to Toñico right now. Just give me a sec, I'll set up the screen. Thanks, Toñico.
One thing Bambina forgot to mention is I'm a proud member of Manila House, and I already paid for my dues for this 2021, and I encourage the rest of you to do so. No, you know, we all have to support our club, and there's no other arts club.
Thank you, Toñico. And I'd like to say, having said that, Jaime is a very good friend of Manila Houses, and we've collaborated on several different projects. Jaime, Toñico, and myself. If you all remember, 2 years ago we did this blockbuster exhibition, which had Juan Luna and I don't know. Do you remember? There were some beautiful Bottom Francisco, just artists that
we
you
had
don't.
Soraya. We had the best portrait artists in the world then.
No, it was amazing. It was really with Amor Solo, artists whose portraits you don't necessarily see, but because they're often commissioned by private clients. So that was a beautiful, beautiful exhibition. So Toñico, would you like to start?
Sure. So the topic today is investing in art during a pandemic. I'm quite a bookworm and movie buff, but having not lived in a pandemic previously, it's always been like a gap in my education and whatnot. If you go to our next slide, this is a picture, a portrait by Edward Munch. It's his self-portrait after the Spanish flu, which is the last real global pandemic. And a lot of us feel this way because we've been in lockdown and whatnot. I mean, if you look at what Edward Munch painted over 100 years ago, after the Spanish flu, it captures what a lot of us are feeling and whatnot, no? Next slide, please. Our government in particular, and I'm not, I'm a neutral person, has had to temper their treatment of certain industries. And COVID basically had a big effect on a lot of art workers and cultural workers. So this is a statement by the NCCA talking about how it's affecting that sector. Next slide, please. There was a lot of uproar when the Straits Times in Singapore did a survey, and the result was the most non-essential job in Singapore was an artist, meaning a non-essential person would have less freedom during a lockdown. Next slide, please. Our own country, the artists were called non-essential in the IATF guidelines. And this is Veronica Peraleja, or Veronica P, or Nika, who is herself an artist from UP, very intellectual, and her boyfriend Reg Yuson, who's a good friend, is also very intellectual as well. They created a movement branding all themselves as non-essential. So it's a non-essential line of clothing. And a lot of artists have been trying to help out in their own way during this time. No? Next slide, please. I've taken this quote from, I have to thank UBS for allowing me to use a lot of their material, particularly Jennifer King of private banking, is the best private banker. So this came from a UBS webinar with Art Basel, where this is a quote from Noah Horowitz, who is the current head of Art Basel Miami, and he's an art economist. So let me read it. One thing we know historically is that crisis yields some of the greatest art of our lives, and this is one historical truth. Above all the historical cliches that we can expect, an absolute flourishing of artists' response to the moment, and many great things to be put out in the coming period. So that's one piece of excitement we should get by this pandemic, that maybe some of these artists are going to be so excited that we're going to see brilliant art. And that's always been in the case of history, that in every crisis, brilliant art emerges. I grew up as a collector. Next slide, please. And we never thought of art. Well, my parents were serial collectors. They collected antiques and everything. So I've been going to auctions since the 70s when I was a kid, when I was 6 years old and whatnot. But the reality is nowadays, a lot of us have to think of art as an investment. And we are always approached with questions about art as an investment, because you may want to upgrade your collection by selling something to acquire more, make it a zero-sum game, or the reality is we've seen it as something that can provide for the future. No? So investing in art has increasingly been accepted as a valid alternative class of investments. I took this when I was taking my CFA courses and as an investment banker. So investment in art is traditionally called a passion investment with both quantifiable and unquantifiable attributes. Quantifiable are when you sell, actually, you'll get a quantified amount. Unquantifiable could include stature as being a major collector, social, verticality, and whatnot. The next slide is my own take on everything. If you go over all the reports of UBS and Basel, all the indices and whatever, looking over decades, you will find that there is actually no correlation with art values to general economic figures that we look at. Talking about the GNP, the GDP, consumption, CPI index, and everything. What does that mean? Whether that goes up or down, it doesn't necessarily follow that it will affect the art market. What you need to look at are what you call the high net worth wealth data. Because the reality, most of art prices are really moved by few individuals. In the Philippines, the better collectors, and I don't want to name a few, but if you analyze the better collectors, they tend to be contrarian investors who buy during crisis and often see periods of crisis as opportunity. Again, it's a cliche because they say that in Chinese, the character for crisis is the same as the character for opportunity. So in a situation like this, we're hoping to see some opportunity come about. Next slide, please. So we've all been in lockdown so long, and what's been happening is businesses have had to morph into online and whatever. And governments throughout the world have been restraining unnecessary spending and boosting certain industries. Once that restraint is released, then the floodgates open. I posted here a portion of a news article talking about the first day when the Hermes store in Shanghai opened. They sold a record $2.7 million in one day because all of these people were not allowed to spend before that. We're seeing a common trend between that and certain segments of the art market as well. Let's go on to the next slide. So for the purposes of this discussion, the art world, let's divide it into two, gallery sales and auction sales, because we have two different source materials for it, whether from UBS and Basel or the New York Times. In general, the art world as a whole is opaque, meaning they're not transparent about the economic figures because most of the private sales are not reported. The difference between this new normal and the pandemic is most online platforms require transparency in pricing. So a lot of the figures are coming out now. To give you an idea, the Basel and UBS work is based on a voluntary survey of, I think it's 700 galleries and 130 collectors. Whereas auction sales have always been more transparent because it's publicly recorded endings. And there are several indices that are subjected to hedonic regression and whatnot to see the trends. Let's first go into gallery sales. The New York Times, next slide please. The New York Times published a summary of this analysis by Basel and UBS. It's available online if you look under UBS Art, and it will show you that in 2019, art sales were estimated at around $64.1 billion, with dealers accounting for 58% of those sales. Now, under that survey that came about, they see a 36% drop during the first half of 2020. That being said, I suspect it may be even more because it's well known that with galleries now, their biggest sales come in art fairs. And in the new normal, art fairs have been virtual, some more successful than others. You know? And with our government talking now that we will be only open to tourists by June 2021, there's a big question on whether the art fairs are going to come out next year, or else they might come out in a virtual platform. We'll talk about the virtual platforms later on. Next slide, please. I have a good friend named Leo Xu who handles David Zwirner for Hong Kong. And David Zwirner was quoted by the New York Times in saying, "The future has arrived so much sooner. Mr. Zwirner said, if galleries are closed, how can we sell art? The online platform is something we have envisioned as an important part of what we do. In a funny way, the art world is late to the party if you think about other retail experiences," he added. The picture in the back is a virtual exhibit for an artist that was prepared during the pandemic and is about the pandemic. It's called Spectre by Josh Smith under Zwirner. And it's the first exhibit that was prepared specifically for the pandemic in a virtual setting. And it's just started September 15, so this is a very current thing. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you innovation in the part of León Gallery. This is a piece by Rafi Napay that is beautiful but gigantic. So if you notice, they had to innovate by showing images of persons, putting a scale to it, because this is 9 feet by about 30 feet and it cannot fit in Leon's exhibition room. Now, I'm putting a quote here from another gallerist when they say, many in the art world say an online viewing room cannot place the first-hand experience of encountering a painting or a sculpture in person, but collectors have grown comfortable buying based on PDF images of artists they know from galleries they trust. Both galleries and auction houses have been made some significant sales based on images posted on Instagram and social media. The reality is in the Philippines, when you go to exhibit, almost everything is sold unless the galleries reserved 1 or 2. And it's all disseminated by Viber or by email and whatever, and that's happening the world over. So the reality is, in terms of the primary market, there was not much innovation needed. There were people who put up virtual shows, and they were sold out also because the normal was already there to buy things based on Viber and just to see it when the show opens. The funny thing about virtual shows is it can cost anything from 20,000 pesos set to millions. I'm gonna ask Jaime later about it because Jaime, during the lockdown, León Gallery has had several walkthroughs, which are substantially expensive. I've been in talks with the Ayala Museum, and I know that their plans, the renovations delayed, and they are planning to have some virtual shows also. And the technologies out there are such that you could almost feel like you could touch them and you could see texture because they're 3-dimensional. But since it's new technology, it has a commensurate price as well. So in terms of primary sales, I really think there's not much of a new normal because for as long as the artists are known artists, then it's easy to sell or it's easy to sell whether through Viber, through groups and whatnot. And next slide, please. Let's talk about Art in the Park. Art in the Park is our one example of an art fair that actually turned virtual. It was supposed to start around March 2020, but it was hit by the lockdown. And because of that, they had to postpone it indefinitely until they put it up in a virtual platform under Spotify. And it was, if I may say, very successful. They extended it from 1 day to 17 days. You know, the proponents of Art in the Park and Art Fair Philippines are always the cutting edge in terms of being in touch in what's happening in the world. And that played well into this art fair being a success. And well, the next question is, some of them are part also of Art Fair Philippines, and we will see whether they continue, no? If they can find a viable platform to bring it out. But one thing that set Art Fair Philippines from the others is the amount of foreign galleries and the amount of foreign visitors. And unfortunately, if it pushes through in February 1st, it's a certainty that they will not be allowed as tourists. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you some shows that were successful during this lockdown, albeit during the times that galleries were able to open by appointment only. So Silverlands had Patti Eustachio, beautiful show. Art Informal, next slide, had this wonderful show of Marina Cruz and Rodel Topaya, and you have to schedule an appointment and everything. And this is an example. The next slide shows a West Gallery show for Rafi Napay. No, next slide, please. And one thing common, if you notice about these shows, they're all established artists where there's always a line already, no? So we don't see, I've seen, my friend runs J Studio and she's been sold out also with the younger artists, but that's largely because they're used to marketing by Viber and social media. Let's give the next slide shows auctions in the pandemic, no? This was the first major auction done by Sotheby's. And a lot of us, since we weren't doing anything then, we were only working from home, watched this because it was available online. And a lot of people were saying it was like a game show, because if you look, the auctioneer is right there in the middle. He's facing screens. There are phone bidders and online accepting bidders out there. And if you can notice, there's a Francis Bacon on the back. We'll go back to that later. So this is the write-up. The next slide, please. So the contemporary art sale, next slide, please, held online at the end of June this year. It was the first big test of virtual auctions. In-person viewing was limited by New York's own reopening guidelines. Some major pieces of art still sold the top dollar. A Francis Bacon triptych, and I'll talk about this later, sold for nearly 85 million, above its estimate. A Jean-Michel Basquiat drawing went for 15 million, which was 3 million more than the high estimate. But some other featured paintings, including one by Roy Lichtenstein and another by Clifford Still, fetched prices in the mid-range. Let's go to the next slide. This is a close-up of the Bacon that sold well. If you notice, I got this from Sotheby's. That's like all the attributions on who owns the image are there. Now, this was owned by a museum previously. And for the longest time, their asking price was $100 million. Until Sotheby's was able to tell them, give us a starting or a reserve estimate at $70 million. So in effect, it was a success when you look at it, because they went above the starting, but their asking price was really $100 million. Nevertheless, it's still the third highest price achieved for the artist at auction. And it sent a signal throughout the whole pandemic that art is resilient. No? The next slide is the Basquiat. Next slide, please. So this Basquiat has two distinctions. It's the highest Basquiat sold for $15.2 million on a paperwork. And second, it was an online bid. So this is the highest strictly online bid ever. Next slide. So León Gallery has had its own hybrid auction. This was a time that during all the social distancing measures are in place, and just like this Saturday, same thing is going to happen. We're going to have an auctioneer. We're going to have online phone bids available. The difference in this auction is a huge amount of online bids and phone bids. Online bids from 5% went up to 60%. The phone bids, it went up as well. You know, we keep on running out of great people at taking phone calls. And it was a different auction in the sense that when the lot is called out, all the online bids shoot the price up all of a sudden. So the auctioneer has to wait as to where to start from. And we felt, and Jaime can talk about this later, that the hunger of the market was there because we made several records. The next slide shows how the social distancing measures were in place and will be placed also during the auction. If you notice, we all have masks in place. The crew are all in bunny suits, PPEs, and we're all socially distanced. And there's a limit. There are people in the doorway who keep people out in case it doesn't, you know, it overflows. So it's not the usual thing. I'm going to make a comment in general, but I personally enjoy some parts of the lockdown because I enjoy the quiet, that I don't have to attend so many cocktails. And I hear that a lot of galleries are also enjoying that because it's an expense out as well. No? Next slide, please. So in this auction, we were able to sell a major Mark Justiniani. I'm only going to point to this one because it's very above average in that it went for 13.4 million hammer during a pandemic, which is double the record of 6.4 million. And it was all, you know, I love this work. It was a massive work. And if you can see it, there's a portrait of the artist above looking at the person making himself a kingmaker. And again, this was all sold without a preview, without people allowing to come in. Now, you can actually go to León by appointment. Then you couldn't. So let's go to the next slide. So I told you that I grew up with collectors, and I know a lot of old collectors as well because of this. And we never thought of art as an investment. It was really a collection and whatnot. So I want to show here on how gradually mainstream Philippines began thinking of art in terms of money. No? So the first time, next slide please, was when Juan Luna's Parisian Life was auctioned by Christie's Hong Kong on October 2002, hammering at US $870,000 or around 46 million pesos then. That was in all the front pages of all the papers because people never realized that a painting of this stature should go for that amount. And it was a government-owned corporation that bought it, and then there were issues about insuring it and whatever, showing it around. Now I believe it's in the National Museum. But this really came out in all the papers, and everybody was buzzing that, wow, a Luna's worth that much. The next one was, the next slide, please. In April 2011, just shortly after, Ronald Ventura's Grey Ground set a record for all Southeast Asian paintings when it sold for $1.1 million in Sotheby's, Hong Kong. It's 46 million pesos as well. This actually led to a changing of a lot of contemporary art because so many artists were enthusiastic about Ventura's auction ending that they started copying his style as well and whatever. Next slide, please. The next slide is Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci. It was sold at auction in November 2017 for 450.3 million. To show you the effect of this, it resulted in a lead increase of 12% of Google searches for the phrase investment in art. The sad thing about this, which I have to mention, is the fact that we haven't seen this painting since it was auctioned off. And it has since been downgraded by certain experts as only a school of Leonardo. So, and the next appraisal of it might remove it to 10% of its last ending. But nevertheless, because of this, everybody was talking about art. Next slide, please. This is something that León is proud of. With the Asian Cultural Council in 2018, we sold a Hoya for 112 million pesos. And to this date, this is still the record. It's signed and dated 1959, oil and canvas. And a lot of people were talking about this again because it's about time that Dean Hoya was given this amount of stature. Next slide, please. I wanted to show samples of art as an investment so that you could have a better idea. When you think of Cesar Buenaventura, he's the son of a painter. Teodoro Buenaventura is from a whole family of Mabini painters. The reality is he was prolific, and there are some fantastic works that are better than others. So a senior member of our art community, who I will not name, on his first day of work, went to Mabini to buy his first Buenaventura, and he decorated his office in UP in 1967 for 70 pesos. Okay? Now, a piece from 1969 sold, and it's this piece in the back, in the online auction for 500,000 pesos. The punchline is this senior member had just gave away his 67 Buenaventura that he bought for 70 to his secretary. Okay. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about a star lot in this auction now. It's Linear 98 and 99 by Lee Aguinaldo. Whenever I see someone walking to the auction room, they are drawn to this piece because this is the best known piece of Lee Aguinaldo. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to show you the back of the painting. The back of the painting shows a receipt that it was sold by Luz Gallery in 1971 for $3,000. So the question is, in 1971, how much was a dollar worth today? I hate to bore you guys with finance, but you just put inflation. Basically, a dollar then is worth $6.40 in 2020, a difference of $5.40 over 49 years. So if you kept your $3,000 in the bank, it would be worth $19,200 today. The opening price for this linear is $8,400,000, which is $172,555.46. So you can see it was a very good investment, but I'm gonna give you two coletillas about that. No? Lee Aguinaldo always priced himself when he was alive on the top of market at New York prices. In 1971, if you were lucky enough to be allotted one, you could have bought a de Kooning in 1971, but that's hindsight. No? Several de Koonings now are like $50 million and whatever, so your $3,000 could have become $50 million. Next slide, please. I wanted to give you a case study of a collector profile. I mentioned it to them once that I've used it in a talk, and I will use it again, only because I admire them as collectors, and I admire Lito Camacho as a finance man. He was probably one of our best finance secretaries and one of the most respected bankers in the whole region. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we were lucky enough to be spoken we were given a speech by Lito, hosted by another private bank, not UBS, where he said that when he first moved to Singapore, there was mail intended for another person, inviting them to a Kusama exhibit. And that's when they started collecting Kusama, because the apartment they moved to had this mail and they liked it. They instantly liked it. And, you know, I'm only going to talk about Kusama here, but this couple have a habit of being before the trend. So their first Kusama was bought for $7,500. It was the artist Infinity Networks from the 60s. He said, at the beginning, I was literally buying as much as I could. Like Kusama, I'm obsessive. As their collection grows, they sometimes sold off lesser works in order to buy better ones. Their strategy of buying deep paid off. Their Kusamas have risen between 20 and 30 times in value. And these are the strong words from Lito. This has been our best performing asset by far. Better than private equity, stocks, bonds, or property, says Lito. And that's why sometimes he lectures about art collecting as investment as well. So let's go to my tips for an investment strategy. I've been taught by many mentors, and it always goes to buy what you like is the primary rule, but throughout the journey, work on cultivating your taste. So you have to jump into the process and learn as much as you can about what interests you. I'm showing another Lee Aguinaldo, which is up for this auction, which in any other auction, if Linear 98 and 99 were out, would be the star of the auction. But unfortunately, it's against these two. My thing is I actually somewhat prefer this one. And I'm sure I'm going to be outbid for Linear 98 and 99. So this is my example of buying what you like. No? But, you know, taste is very subjective. A friend of mine thought that this was a Gas Albor. I will not name who that is. But no, this is a very important Lee Aguinaldo. Next. Investment strategy 2. Next slide, please. Follow the money. Buy the art being bought by people more important than you. Okay, I picked this Anita Magsaysayho for this strategy. Why did I do this? It's not the bucket list type of thing that the typical, the starting out collector or the midstream collector would like, because it is, you know, doesn't have the women in the field with the bounties and the agriculture and whatever. But the reality is this is actually the most sought after medium. It's egg tempera. And if you go to the houses of some of the best collectors in the Philippines, you will find Anita egg temperas. This is a small one, but again, you follow the money. You follow the people who are actually seasoned collectors and are buying things. And this is something that I would go to. The punchline is, this was a find from an estate sale in America, but it's proven, it's wonderful, and hopefully if Doris is watching, she should know. I mean, she knows about this piece, but this is the kind of Anita that I would go for because of the medium. It's very rare, egg tempera. Next strategy, please. Next slide. Do not focus on buying cheap. The art market is a trophy market. I've learned my mistakes, and I was taught by several other people that it's better to go for the best that you can't afford. Why am I showing this Ronald Ventura cage? This is from a show in Perotan in Hong Kong, which featured a lot of cages, and in my opinion, this was the best cage among them. It's a huge piece The show is called Cages and Voids. And if you try to buy this Ventura from the current gallery price for this size, it's easily 28, 30 million pesos. And there is a market for that who buys on the current gallery price. But I see this as an opportunity to buy because this is only starting at 10 million pesos. But it's a beautiful piece and it's very thought-provoking because Ventura has all of these subtexts within his art. And when you see it, there's struggle within the cage and there's a void outside. And I guess maybe this is an example of one of the limitations of virtual viewing because it's a much better piece when you see it in person. It's massive. Next slide, please. When buying something, next slide, please. When buying something from an online platform, do not hesitate to ask for detailed pictures of certain areas of the painting, such as the back of the condition report. Why am I saying about these light boxes? That because we're not exhibiting it in the preview room because it's difficult to install because of the wiring, but for the person who bought it, has it in the intact packaging. And if you want us to take pictures of it to show you angles and whatever, we will. And as I showed to you with the Lee Aguinaldo, sometimes the back of the painting is as important because it's from there that you found out that it was our representative for the Sao Paulo Biennale. But this is something that I am pushing to all of you because you won't see it in the preview room. Even if you set an appointment, you won't see it because we don't have it wired up. It's a bit complicated to install, but we can guarantee you that it is intact and it is in place. So do not hesitate when you buy, not only from León, from anyone, to ask questions about things that you can only find when you have details other than the catalog picture. You might want to look at certain areas. You might want to look at the signature. You might do whatever. You might, now that you're allowed to physically see things, you might even be able to put things against a blue light or whatever. But I'm telling you, León is very thorough about all of those things. So I never had an issue. And they're very open about showing all of these things. But this is a lot that should have a lot more attention, but we don't have it wired up for display. But ask for it, we'll show it to you. The next tip is you buy a painting from a known artist, try to buy from one of his golden years. This is called Angeles by Hoya, and it is in the very end of his golden years. Why? Because this is the period that we enjoy the most in terms of his style. It's before his grant where he changed his style. No? So this is a much smaller piece than Space Transfiguration, but it is beautiful and it is a book piece. And I am incentivized to buy it because it's from my birth year, but that is a watch collector's thing and not an art collector's thing. But this would be the focal point of any person's collection. And again, it's a problem with photography and whatnot because this is much more impressive in person. Next slide, please. So we've had many mentors, Jaime and I, and among people. And the late Boy Villegas always told us that if you're a real collector, you look into student works or when the artist was still developing their visual voice. Now, this is a mixed media work by Rodel Tapaya. It's the best of the grid series and was award-winning in the Philip Morris. But it is not what Tapaya is known for. And if you really zoom in, you will see that it's the typewriters made up all with letters and words, and there are sayings there. If Boy was around, then he would tell us, you know, that's a more important Tapaya because he's still developing his visual voice. And I'll show another Tapaya later, but I feel that this is a very important work and it's a massive work. Next slide, please. Try to invest. Next slide, please. Hello? Yeah. Try to invest in paintings that are personal to the artist or those that they are emotionally invested in. I showed two here. One is a John Santos called Through the Peephole, where it turns out that this was a very important painting to the couple. No? There are many subtexts within the picture, and this is a highly intellectual, very intelligent couple. And it's really Pam and John in the painting. And you can try to read in what you can about all the different elements of the painting, but these are very highly intelligent painters who, their figurative series of genres, the most sought after area, although now his style is different. No? The second painting is by Mark Costignani. It's called Balancing Life. It's at a time that was very tumultuous from him, as he told to the first buyer. It's at the time that he was working together with two different artists, both in the Salimpusa collective. His wife then, Karen Flores, within whom which he had two children, and Joy Malyari, who is now his current partner. So in 1997, he was trying to balance the life between two. And if you notice, his two children are in a seesaw between night and day and whatever, and he seems to be at a loss. And I think he's even signifying who his choice is in the end when you see one finger is moving up. But my point about these two paintings is both artists have invested themselves in these works. So you're not only buying, a typical piece by these people. There's personal feeling here, and it's always good to invest in something that the artist really was personally involved in. Next slide, please. Okay, this is my attempt at not being sued for defamation. Only deal with people with integrity. This is a scene from Sesame Street that I grew up with two bandits that they are planning a heist, taking the Anne to the golden van and whatever. And the reality is, in the art scene, I only like dealing with people who I can do with a handshake. And definitely Jaime is one of them. But there are a lot of people who are lurking out there who are trying to sell you their other stuff or questionable stuff and whatnot. So you have to treat it as a track record. Once the person's integrity with you is broken, then review all your relationships. Okay, but this is a general thing. I'm not pointing at anyone in particular, but I can tell you that I can deal with Jaime with no papers and with a handshake. Next, please. Okay, one of my good friends and classmates, Tricky Lopa, told me the other day, good art will always find an audience. And that's one of the reasons why art survives this pandemic and whatnot. This Rodel Tapaya, which is called Nida, is one of his favorite models, who is always mistaken for Tricky. In fact, Tricky's Facebook status picture is of Nida as well. But just talk about good art will always find an audience. So I want to end by reading a fable that was written by Kenny Schachter, who's one of the best art columnists. And I will stop the fable each other to annotate while the painting that I'm going through beside it. So it's called The Great Art World Reassessment by Kenny Schachter. Start with the voice of a little boy. Tell me the one about the art world again, then I'll go to bed. Man on screen. But my boy, you're growing weary. Sleepy thoughts about your head. Voice of little boy. Please, that's one of my favorite. I promise just once more. On the right is a beautiful Ankyuk for sale, mother and child. We have it listed, although some documents called it as a man. I think this is my favorite Ankyuk that's for sale. Other people like the rooster, but I prefer this. Man on screen. Okay, snuggle down, my boy. Though I know you know full well. The story starts before then, in an art world I once dwelt, which is just a few months ago. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty. Back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the art world came up with auctions and fairs to trade across all lands. This is a Zobel, Seria Blanca, which is the most sought after kind of Zobel in Spain. And it's very rare to find this in the Philippines. And the Secretary of Zobel just passed away last Monday, and he had a book strictly about Seria Blanca. But they swelled and got, next slide please. But they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned. We'd always had our art, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a sale and with a click. We noticed dealers had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted and the art-life balance broke. This is the artist Dino Gabito beside his Shroud number 5, which he was inspired by another artist, as you can see in the online catalog, but it has the most amount of shrouds, and I think it's a massive Dino Gabito, and he's one of the most sought after artists. And that's a Garibay below. There's a Luz and whatnot. No? Collector's eyes, next slide, please. Collector's eyes grew smaller. Every advisor had many phones. They filtered out the meanings, but amidst all the noise, we stood alone. And every day the calendar grew thicker until you couldn't see the art. So we flew in planes to find it, while down below we filled our carts. This is a Jigger Cruise diptych that, in my opinion, is from the best period of Jigger. And it has a nice painting below it. It has many nuances. You should go to the preview just to see it. Next slide, please. We'd run around all days in circles. We'd forgotten how to look. We swapped the galleries for art fairs, many populated with crooks. We filled the museums with art stars because our haste was never capped. Until each day you went to see them, you find what was already tapped. And while we drank and smoked and collected, our galleries taught us why. This is a Mark Aaron Reyes that was featured in Art Fair Tokyo. It's a 5x5 piece. Mark Aaron Reyes is one of the most sought after young contemporary artists, and the line is so long. It's very Zen-like, just like a exemplary Mark Aaron Reyes. Next slide, please. It's best to not upset the status quo, more convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted and told us all to hide away. But while we were hidden, amidst the fear and all the while, the people dusted off their instincts and let go of art gossip vile. This is a Juan Luna from the period that he was back in the Philippines from Europe, and it is Marikina, and it belonged to the collection of my favorite teacher of all time and mentor, Doreen Fernandez, and her husband, Willie. I was fortunate enough to be their personal lawyer, and this has excellent provenance because from Doreen and Willie, it went to another Sears collector, and I feel very sentimental towards this piece because my personal collection started with Philippine scenes as well. And I like Philippine scenes Lunas, maybe because then that was all I could afford as well. Next, please. They started looking again and contacting all their friends. While the airports gathered dust, they called to make amends. And while the sky's less full of voyagers, our lungs no longer wheezed. The studios bore new artworks. It actually had time to breathe, meaning the pinturas dried already. People started drawing, some painting, many more were making. This is a beautiful Dalena that just arrived. And if there's one thing that I think that you should come to see the preview, it's this ILI series Dalena, because this is one of the best I've seen. And it just arrived, so try to look at it. No? Next, please. Next slide, please. Bambina, next slide. Yeah. We'd grown so used to bad news, but some good news had us waking. And so when we found the cure and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the art world we found to the one we'd left behind. Old habits became extinct and they made way for the new. And every act of creativity was now given its rightful due. I'm very excited about this piece. This is a Louis Cordero, but it's one of the better Louis Corderos to come out, and it's starting at a fraction of gallery price. So I hope Louis Cordero will get his due in the secondary auction market. Next, next slide, please. Voice of Little Boy. But why did it take a virus to bring the art world back together? Man on screen. Well, sometimes you've got to get sick, my boy, before you start to get better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow and all the things artists will do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Art World Reassessment. And yes, since there have been many, but that's the story of how it started and why hindsight's 2020. Good night. This is a Pamian Santos that is a major piece, and this is the first Pamian Santos to come out. So again, we're very excited about this piece because we've never had the Pamian Santos of this caliber to come out, and I'd like to see that Pam is given all her due by the secondary market and the auction scene. Thank you very much. That's my presentation. Can open for Q&A.
Thank you, Toñico. That was amazing. That was like a little bit of a masterclass in investing, a survey of the art world as well in the Philippines and overseas. I was thinking, Jaime, do you want to say a few words before we go to the Q&A? And people, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. Sorry, and I'll read them out.
Wow, Toñico, that was a great presentation. I learned, even myself, I learned so much from it. Excellent data that you gathered.
Well, thanks to UBS and Art Basel, no? And you, I've learned so much from you. Yeah. But Jaime,
I just want to point out, you mentioned Dino. Dino's with us today. We have a couple of artists here. Dino, Chris, Ardenia, some good friends of ours. Welcome.
Oh,
thanks for joining us.
I have to talk about Chris Ardenia. To me, that guy is a rising star, and he's part of the reason why we're very excited about certain things. And we've had him before in Manila House, and he's very eloquent, no?
Yes.
But I wanted to ask Jaime a question first, Bambina, if you don't mind, no?
No, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Because, you know, Jaime has been very good at dealing with issues with the lockdown and the new normal. And I wanted to hear his personal take on the demand, because I personally feel that this auction that he has now is one of the best in terms of number of quality pieces, and they seem to be coming out. And I've seen the demand in the past few auctions, but I'd like to hear it from Jaime himself, if you don't mind.
Wow, this auction has a lot of very interesting pieces that really draw the crowd. And it touches all the segments of the collecting world. We have a good representation of old masters with the Amorsolo, the Luna, the Anita Magsaysay Hos, and the H.R. Ocampos. We have very good moderns like the Hoyas and the Ben Cabs. And for the contemporary, we're very well represented by the John Santos, the Pamian Santos, Louis Cordero, and so much more. So it's a very good mix. And we've gotten a lot of very good feedback that this auction, they feel is even the best auction offering of León Gallery. But of course, I always like to think that it's the best every auction.
But I wanted to ask, no, you were talking about buying established artists or artists that are represented by established galleries, and then you're saying that a lot of artists, a lot of work is pre-sold before the exhibit even opens. And I think some people have said they have that experience as well when they go to the art fairs, right? That they go into a booth and only to find out that maybe 85% have been sold. How does an unknown artist break in? How does he get the big break? How, you know, because you're talking about all these artists in the auction right now who are very well known, but they must have started somewhere, right? So how does the art world work for them and they break out?
Will you take this, Jaime, or me?
No, go ahead, Toñico.
There are many factors. You have to have the right collectors and the right gallerists who will know who are the right collectors to get it, no? And sometimes it's better for artists to make it abroad rather than to make it here. Let's talk about Chris Ardena, no? Chris Ardena is famous abroad because of Art Dubai and all the Tang Gallery and whatnot. And finally, that was recognized in the last art fair where his local gallerist sold him out. So that's a situation where someone made it abroad before coming here. Another thing is if you impress the proper handler, because the issue about contemporary artists all the time is whether they will be able to sustain their career and have the right things. And again, it's personal bias, but my two favorite handlers, depending on their pace of career, are Tina Fernandez and Derek Flores. And I feel that with either Tina or Derek is handling someone, there's something behind that someone as well. And the two people, the people who patronize both Tina and Derek will also look into that artist just because Tina and Derek are handling them. And Jaime himself has his León Gallery International, so if there's a show coming out there with an artist, you know that there's some reason for that artist. And there are all sorts of cliques in the Philippines on what artist should go with what manager or what school or what not. And that's a whole different seminar, but there's all these things in place.
And also, as an addition to
yeah.
Are you done, Toñico?
Yeah, I'm done.
What you said. There is a very stark difference between us who handle the secondary market and the primary market, like them of Tina, Derek, and all of them. Us in the secondary market is very democratic. Whoever comes first, whoever pays the highest, they get the work. In the primary market, it's based on relationships. It's based on, that's where the lines come in, and all sorts of things to that contribute, or the factors that affect on why the galleries would sell a work to a client, and then so there's really a difference between the primary and the secondary market. Yeah,
it's huge. Auctions have really democratized in the art scene and gotten rid of certain cartels over certain paintings, because certain artists are really left to certain groups as well. And I personally don't want to kowtow anymore to someone and I'll just buy it in auction, because I've had so many accommodation buys, so many buys when artists need help or whatever. I mean, I would always support an artist, but sometimes I find it's cheaper to buy it in auction. And there was a joke done about Larry Gagosian being approached in a cocktail. Larry Gagosian's one of the top gallerists in the world, and he was basically asked, now that I bought 10 paintings from you, when would I be able to buy something I actually like? So you don't get that in the secondary market. In an auction, all you need is money. So if you want to get this beautiful John Santos, just outbid everyone else. And it's been very, very invigorating to the art scene, because I grew up with collectors. I've been looking at art for 30 years. And I tend to look at Jaime's previews as like going to a great museum opening, because I see stuff that were in private homes that I've never seen before. You see the best things come out. And I encourage all artists to pass by the preview just to get an art education. Yes, Bambina.
But I wanted to ask, how do you not recommend for artists to bypass that whole system and sell directly? Is that not recommended, that model? Or because it's still dominated by galleries?
There's been talk about that model lately because of the rise of Instagram and social media. If you notice in your last Manila House talk, Valentine Willie was encouraging artists to do that, to go direct to the market. The issue with that is, let's talk about Chris again. Chris recognizes the need for a gallerist. He wants just to paint. He doesn't want to have to kowtow and sell his work. And he trusts that the gallerist will put him in the hands of the best collectors. And if I were an artist, I would like to segregate that also. So if an artist has a hard time breaking in, then maybe he should seek patronage from some of the better patrons, like Manong, Dr. Kwanang. Dr. Kwanang will always give someone a chance because he's always pushing for art. My good buddy Ken Hakuta, if you caught Ken's eye, then he'll back you all the way. But you have to catch his eye. No? I don't. Yeah. Yes,
yeah,
I mean.
I think also that it's also a formula, and of course there's really no set formula or set equation to get to the level of all the successful artists, because it involves certain things, and it may work in the manner of direct selling for one but not for the other. But definitely it has to be recognized that a gallery is important. It's imperative for an artist's career, and you can see that artists handled by galleries are doing much better than artists who have done things themselves. But of course, there are also certain artists who have already achieved a certain level of success that being handled by a gallery no longer matters. So it's really a balance. I don't know. I mean, very difficult to answer. And I think of course luck also plays a big role in the success of each of these artists.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify though. I think if Chris wants to say something, when we were talking the last time, the last webinar we had about art with for Manila House, he also said though, even if he sells directly, he's using his own Instagram to sell his work, he still courses it through his agent or through his gallery. Chris, you're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes,
because they're like logistical aspects as well to art, right? You can sell the art, yes, but you still have to pack it, arrange for the transfer, send it off and all that. So I guess in that sense, no, I mean, galleries still play an important role, or your manager, or your gallery, at least taking care of all the logistics. So you just concentrate on creating.
Yes,
that's from well, Chris this time.
I've hung around with a lot of artists, and a lot of them tend to be introverted that way, and would rather that someone speaks for them and whatnot. I mean, but it all takes, you know, all types. One of my favorite artists, Bogey Ruiz, is great at expressing himself. No, but the others would rather like talk to other people. Like for example, Dino Gabito. Dino Gabito, so loyal to his handler Chitty, who might be here as well, and it works. The partnership works, and Dino is such a good kid, and he likes things being handled by Chitty as well. So you know. It's a balance. It really depends on the synergy with your relationship with your manager, and that's not only in the Philippines. It's throughout the whole world that we see this interaction. But you see, my issue also sometimes with artists talking directly to clients through social media is sometimes the clients don't understand that an artist has to develop their own visual voice, and a commission, if they direct a commission with certain things, it might make the artist deviate from his visual voice. So that's the only reason I'm against it. If a gallerist is protective about the artist's integrity, I prefer that he's with the gallerist. Especially if they're just learning. No? It's most important that they try to develop their visual voice. And we go back to the golden years talk. That's a large part of it as well.
But are galleries always open to taking on new artists? Like some might have their lists full already, no?
There are good gallerists and there are bad gallerists. But just, I don't know. It's a case-to-case situation. It's all about synergy.
I also don't think that galleries would, I mean, we're talking about the primary galleries, primary market. Yeah. They just don't take any artists also. The artists share the same vision as them. They have to, the galleries themselves have to like the artists they represent, or they have to believe in what they're representing. So I think it has something to do with that. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. There has to be synergy in philosophies.
Okay, I have a question now about moving now from galleries to auctions, right? The auction, the works come to you. What's the process, Jaime? They come to you, you assess it and all. Obviously, you have to check, you have to verify and check for fakes, because some artists are prone to be faked by forged. So what's the whole process there, authenticating process?
Basically, the art that we get are probably 99% from collectors, and maybe the ones directly from artists constitute a very, very small part. But the ones from collectors, of course, if it comes from an unquestionable provenance, I mean, we take it immediately, and of course, no questions asked. But for certain pieces that appear like from collectors abroad who send us images, and of course we have to do our due diligence. We have to do some research on them, like we check all the documents, all documentations, publications, to check if the works were ever published. But if we do not find any of those, then we have our own panel of consultants for certain artists. So every artist have the respective panel of consultants. So that's how the process. That's how we do. That's a sequence of things that we do before accepting a work. And the moment everything looks good, then we put it up for auction. So it's as easy as that, but of course involves a process, and we just have to follow it. And of course, when something is put up for auction, it's always our name at stake. So we are very careful in putting things. So there was one collector who just mentioned coming here to the office that every artwork is fake until proven otherwise. So I thought, wow, that's also kind of interesting. So why not? Yeah. So we really have to check the marks, whether they all pass the criteria for authentic works. Yeah.
And some artists, like Bernard Sobel had Raphael, right, who just passed away, who would authenticate all his works. And then Claudio Bravo has the Marlborough Gallery, right? Am I?
Right? Yeah. Like for Sobels now, well, the family. Georgina Padilla is quite competent in saying whether a work is by Zobel or not. His son, the son of Rafael Perez Madero in Madrid, was also trained he was trained in the last couple of years to follow in his father's footsteps. So I think there shouldn't be any problem. And every Zobel would always have very good markings at the back that we could base in the future catalog raisonné that is coming out for Zobel.
Can you share, without naming names, any experience where you found out that the work was subsequently fake and you had to return it or you had to take it out of the auction?
Yes, I think no auction house is exempt from this. And I think that it happens everywhere. Yes, I think yes, we have. So let me just think. Definitely, we have taken down some works in the past. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So nothing comes to mind right now, but yes, there have been.
Or if not whether it's fake or it's real, it's not fake, it's authentic. But the issue of ownership, there's also ownership, contested ownership.
Also, yeah, right? We have also taken. Well, I remember very well that we have had some pieces that was contested by family members, and just an example was the independence flag of Andres Bonifacio that was given to the Bautista family in Bulacan. So the whole family came, but they relented that they'll just divide the money, then give back the flag and fight over it because it will probably disintegrate already. So we were able to convince them to just do the process of selling and just divide the money among all of them. Yeah. So we were successful in getting that accomplished. Yeah.
Well, we've also had situations, Bambina, where families, rather than fight over who gets a particular piece from their collection, will just decide to auction it and all of them will bid na lang. It's better that way.
We have handled a very important collecting family here in Manila where one sibling wanted this, another sibling wanted that, and another sibling wanted this. Then one sibling stood up and said, why don't we just sell everything? If you sibling want something from the collection of our parents, why don't you buy it at auction so it will be fair? Because it's very difficult to divide artworks. One will always get more than the other, or there will always be resentment after that. This sibling got more than her, or we were shortchanged for this. So the best would be sell everything, just buy. If you want something, buy everything at auction. At least it's done by a third.
Open, it's democratic.
Very democratic, and there will never be any talks afterwards. So I think that's a very ideal way of doing things. Yeah, settling an estate.
in relation to that, I have a question from Eric Nielsen, who asks, if a piece has not been traded recently, how is the minimum bid price set?
Okay, normally estimates are always achieved based on previous auction results. Okay, we have ArtPrice. There are auction databases that everybody can be part of. There is artprice.com, AskArt, and many others. But if there has not been any work traded or auctioned of a particular artist, then we can base the estimate from the primary market price, the gallery that handles the artist. But of course, we cannot also use the selling price of a gallery as the estimate, because it is always assumed that anybody can just go to the gallery and buy a work. So we normally price it more conservatively than how much that artist would sell in the primary market.
So you can get some good deals at auction, right?
You can get what?
You can get some good deals at auction.
Certainly. I mean, the very essence of an auction is to get a good deal. And also, of course, the rare is also it's already a given that rare works come out at auction. Yeah.
I'm very superstitious, Bambina. When I sell something, you ask Jaime, I never put a high reserve. I just leave it up to the market because I find it malas. And I see every time I do something like that, I get a good result in general. And just for you to know, I've attended a lot of the webinars of Basel and UBS. And a large question of that is about what auction houses are doing about guarantees nowadays. Because guarantees are something, or reserves and whatnot, that can really affect the profitability of an auction house. And going back to that Francis Bacon, as I said, the museum for years wanted $100 million for it. But it's only when they agreed to Sotheby's at a low that they got that record. So I really think it's having a good relationship with the auction house and setting something that is a win-win scenario for both the consignor and the auction house is the best possible scenario.
Now, you as a collector, Toñico, do you have any emotional attachment to the works that you have? How do you decide which you can let go of? And do you see them every day, or do you have so much that you have a separate bodega where it's all there, or a separate gallery where you walk around and think, oh, okay.
My wife is going to watch this, so she's going to hear about all of my bodegas, and you know that I have a lot of paintings in Manila House as well, no? But the reality is the house is my wife's domain, the office is mine, and I'm attached over the things that I have personal connection with. Like I collect a lot of amorsolos and whatever's of my relatives, but at the same time, I don't. I try not to be it because I have to. You know, the thing about luxury goods, there's a saying among yacht owners that the best day is the day that you bought your yacht and the day that you sold it. And in certain paintings, that could be the same thing. And sometimes there's a lot of pressure to have like 50 million pesos on your wall, or 6 or 10 million pesos on your wall. I have young kids, no? So yes, it's a very hard attachment, but I'm not at the point of being like Silvana Diaz, who cries every time she sells something. But there is some emotional attachment to it. But my primary thing is taking care during this pandemic of my family and my employees. I have so many employees, so I've not let go of anyone. And these are hard times, so we have to think of all of these things. But yes, it is a very trying process in deciding what to sell. And I honestly leave it up to Jaime to tell me what he thinks will do well in auction, because Jaime has this mental database of who wants what. And he can more or less tell you whether this is a good one of this artist or what, no? So yes, I sell when it's the right time, but I'm primarily advised by this man.
Do you ever sell and kind of, you know, look back and think one day I'll get it back? Or when you sell, you sell?
No, there's always that one day I get it back. You know, I'll tell you something. When Jaime was starting out, I had a beautiful thing, a tribute. It was a religious painting, so it's not in my top priorities. But in hindsight, the frame maker just died. He was the gilder of Toñico Manahan. It was San Ramon Nonato from the 17th century. And yes, I missed that one because, but then it paid for things then. It allowed me to buy more things.
Yeah.
So I have to be philosophical. And one day, all of you will probably see Jaime's secret collection. Of what, but we all have that. I mean, you know, there are things that we can sell at a moment's notice, but I guess I will never sell the things that are connected with my family. No.
But you expect those to stay in the family, hopefully?
Well, if they want to sell it, I'll buy it from them. This is why we work hard.
No, but let's say after you go, are you hoping that it would remain?
I have written instructions from my wife on who to talk for what, and for the art, it's Jaime.
Oh, okay. So it's in your hands, Jaime.
Yeah. He's younger than me, so he should be able to take care of my family and disposing of the art, no? Because I am a serial collector. I have ceramics, I have other things. The ceramics, he can probably help as well, or some of these. But in terms of my sports memorabilia, comics, no, I'm sorry, it's not going to Jaime, it'll go somewhere else. But yes, I trust Jaime with all of these things.
Jaime, pressure.
Pressure. Thank you, Toñico.
Sure.
I have a question here from my tocayo, Bambina Jacinto. Toñico and Jaime, what are your top 3 things that you look for in quality art that don't have to do with its monetary value? It's a good question.
Okay. Go first, Toñico. Me.
I need a visceral kick in my gut at this point to really like something. And yes, I bought something from this very young artist lately. No question of monetary value, but I got that visceral kick in the gut. And yes, when I do buy, I don't think of monetary return.
Yeah. Well, for the 3 things, I mean, she's asking for 3 things. There are 3 things that I honestly consider before I buy something. And not many people may agree, or not many people may admit to agree this. Number 1 is, of course, I have to like it. Number 2, I should be able to sell it when I need the money. So, of course, we can't buy something that we cannot sell, right? And number 3, I should have space for it. Otherwise, it will be in storage. So those are the 3 things, I think. Yeah. And I think being able to resell something, I think everyone considers that. I mean, no one buys something, no one buys, I mean, very few people buy Rolls Royces. As we see very few Rolls Royces on the road, right? So I think it's because of that too. Yeah.
So
I don't know. I think I have a sickness. I buy too many things.
Now, this is another question that's somehow related to what we just discussed from Santiago Cruz, who's still young, graduated college, but his background deals a little with art. He has a passion and the interest, and he wants to nurture it. So how does he do it? What do you recommend? What's the best, route to take?
Well, if he doesn't take any formal education in art, the best thing would be to go to every exhibition opening, attend every, come to our previews, I mean, all these things are free. I mean, going to every, being in the mailing list of every gallery, try to subscribe to ArtNet News, art newspaper, and a lot of art industry gossip. I mean, these are very educational. These are very insightful media for people interested in art. I think this is a great step in getting there.
For me, he has to get the right mentors, get into the right houses, and if you ask me, the big opening in the art scene is for art criticism. Hone that craft. We don't have any more writers anymore, and we need the writers the most. And writing will get you closer to the art. Look, there's Rod Paras Perez, who had his own. He was an artist as well, as Sid Reyes and everything, and it would get them closer to the other artists as well. So writing is a good path to get closer to the artists. They're both bohemians, so that might be the easiest way to get into the inner circles also.
Yeah, but when you talk about criticism, there are a lot of sacred cows here in this market. So it's really, Jaime, you're laughing. To actually be an objective critic in this market, I think is very challenging.
This goes to all forms of criticism. I think the big problem is that libel in this country is not decriminalized, unlike other jurisdictions. And the problem with that goes back to what Jaime was talking about in terms of provenance. Since we lack writers, we lack documentation, it's difficult, even in this information age, to establish provenance. So this will be the problem of the future, because in my mind, and I'm biased again because I'm one of Jaime's best friends, I collect the catalogs of León Gallery because they're superbly written and they're a great track of all things. And these guys had to learn, the hard way on how to come up with provenance with all the resources. So I have a complete set of all of their catalogs, and I use that to look into things. Just like when we started out, we were using Silvana's database for certain periods. And while he was still credible, Jack Pilar's listings of the unknowns and whatever. So just jump into it, and writing, maybe start with archiving or documentation, will get you closer to the artists, and you might see their processes as well.
Yeah, but in terms of providing a real framework for the quality of an artist as an artist evolves or whatever, it's very hard to do that in our society, I think. Because people don't want to piss off an artist, or an artist is revered as, being of a certain level or something. But I mean, it's like with everything, they're good, there's good output and there's not so good output, right? And it's very easy to extol work that's very good because, if it's all there, all the elements are there and everything, it's great. But when, for example, and I'm sure you know which ones, I mean, there are artists that suddenly commercialize their works, and you sort of know, and you start thinking, okay, wait a minute, why did you do that? But you can't really come out and say, they did that, because you're going to get pilloried, not the artist, but you.
Yeah.
So that I find is one of the challenges here of maybe, going into art criticism. And, it might dissuade people who want to get into it as well. Because I agree with you that there's a need for that here.
Well, let's talk about that Luna, no? As I mentioned, Doreen Fernandez was my personal mentor. And at one point, she was telling me that maybe I should write a column just like hers. And I told her straight out, ma'am, I am not as nice as you. I cannot criticize. But for a while, the one critic who got away with it before he passed away was Clinton Palanca. So maybe things will change. I don't know. And that could move into art. But what I'm telling you is there is a serious lack of writers for art. And we're going to feel the brunt of that in the future.
Yeah. Well, that also needs scholarship, right? To be an art critic, it needs a lot of scholarship also.
Well, if you ask me, Jaime would be willing to pay for the scholarship for a future art writer or whatever, because we need them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather do that than throw it away on something else. No?
Well, Jaime, that's exactly why you do those little contests, right? Those little essay contests.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and another field also that we really lack in the Philippines is connoisseurship, and I think it's an entire different subject altogether. And there are special fields of school in London and in Boston, especially for art connoisseurship. Yeah.
Sorry, going into that, can I just mention one thing? Because I kind of rushed this presentation, but there's one piece that I wanted to bring out, and I want to mention it now only because I think it's important. Jaime was talking about connoisseurship, and for a certain era, our most important guideline was if it came from the Philippine Art Gallery. And there is a piece here in this auction from one of the lesser known members of the Philippine Art Gallery, Larry Tronco, Jaime, right?
Yes.
And that is a piece that should be highlighted. I'll probably put it out on my Instagram for people to notice. But the fact that it's from the time of the Philippine Art Gallery and he's not that well known to me, that's a definite buy. It's like the Estelas in Manila House. Of the neo whatever's, Estelas the least known, but they're beautiful works. So there's a lot of beautiful art out there that can come out. And I don't know, I guess part of it also was studying in the old Rizal Library in Ateneo, where it was part of the Ateneo Art Gallery as well. So we were exposed to all of these things and we took it for granted. And I guess,
true. Very true.
Yeah.
Let's go to a question from Luke Scanlan. Do you see any changes in collector and or artist behavior in regards to younger or new buyers entering the market? Could we see new best practices or mediums appear in the future?
The market now has really changed compared to many years ago before social media. I think social media has played a very big role in the current art market. And also the behaviors among collectors has also been totally affected by social media. There has been also an interest in international art, and we are seeing a trend that some local collectors are also looking at the offerings of the international art market. Why do they do this? I think it's also because for tantamount prices of Philippine art vis-a-vis international art, so they want to hedge their collection with international art. So I think this has also been very evident nowadays among the present collecting community.
One thing, if I can say this, in the new realities, ever since the lockdown, the auction houses have noticed, since they've converted to online, that they have a much lower demographic in age. In the Philippines, we see that the older collectors are still buying online because usually they're assisted by their grandchildren or children or whatnot. By the way, just to say it, Luke is probably one of the best at doing virtual walkthroughs. He's excellent at that technology. He's a good friend.
He's very good.
He's very good. Yeah.
Do you have any more questions? I just want to ask, before we close, how has Philippine art fared? For Philippine contemporary, well, we can do contemporary and masters. How has it fared internationally during this time? Do you have any data or
you're talking about Philippine art, Bambina?
Yeah. Is it still a largely Philippine market collecting Philippine art?
Philippine art is still really largely, I would say 98% is still goes to Filipino buyers. And I see, because of AI, I get to see the very reasonings of galleries and why they want to exhibit Philippine artists abroad, even if the paintings come back to the Philippines. And I think that's not the point. I mean, they don't find it the point, whoever gets the paintings, because eventually they go back to the Philippines. But I think it's getting the art out there, getting them seen, getting them exposed to international critics, international dealers, international audience. And I think that's really the point and why they exhibit abroad. So yes, the pieces still come back to the Philippines, meaning the buyers are largely Filipinos. But there are certain artists that are bought internationally already. For modern art, I see that Fernando Zobel has been bought by a lot of honkies, Indonesians, Singaporeans. Amor Solo too, there has already been an international appeal since the 1990s for Amor Solos, when they have started to appear in Christie's and Sotheby's in Hong Kong. And of course, today, you will see that there are a lot of Geraldine Javier's in Hong Kong, Singapore, and also in other countries. But whether they reach Europe and the Americas, probably why not? I mean that will have to be the job of the gallerists who take part in international fairs and exhibitions. So many things are still progressing. So hopefully we will see a difference in due time.
If I can add to what Jaime is saying, Bambina,
Sure.
I can name two young artists who were personally picked by the curators of international shows, and since they were personally picked by the curators, their works were all sold out to foreigners. No, that's Chris Ardena and Sian Dairit, two separate occasions, in Art Dubai and the other one. So those are all bought by foreigners. No, probably on that front also, thanks to Ken Hakuta, we now know that the National Gallery of America, as part of the Smithsonian, has accepted a donation of a combination work of Jigger Cruz and Manuel Ocampo. And that is a major achievement, no, in terms of exposure of the Philippines abroad. But yeah, Jaime is very exposed to all of those markets, so he knows very well all the extent of real exposure. No?
Well, our friend Ken Hakuta, Ken, you're here, right? Hi. He advocates for that, right? He thinks that Filipino artists need that exposure abroad for their own art to evolve and mature, right? He's a big believer in that. Although that's also logistically not always possible, but we know from history that's what Juan Luna did. He went to Paris, and Felix Resurrection Hidalgo as well, right? So that was always an important component of their own development as artists. But I'm not sure how feasible that is now. And maybe with the exchange of information through the internet and social media, there's a lot more osmosis somehow, or, you know, symbiosis, I would say.
Well, if I can just speak for what he's saying, as far as what Ken always says, is that Philippine artists have to move abroad and to compete and to work hard in that environment. Remember, Ken is the nephew of Nang Jampek, who is viewed as a hero in Germany as well. And if you go over Netflix, over Abstract, the Art of Design, you will see many artists who had their big moment by moving to Germany and getting all of these things in place. And Nang Jampek was the head of Fluxus with Joseph Joyce and everything. And he really moved there and competed. And that's what, from what my talks with Ken, he always talks about, that the Filipino artists have to really immerse themselves abroad and compete. And, you know, he's someone I totally respect, and I think he knows what he's talking about. You know? And I think he put a question.
Right? We've had this discussion of artists, especially from the 13 moderns and the neorealists, who could have actually made it big, right? But because of circumstance or whatever, they never quite got there. But if you look at their output, they really were on a par. And we were talking about Nena Sagil maybe could have been another Kusama. She could have been Arya.
Better than Kusama. Yeah.
If I have to add on that, just like Nena Sagil, I have gotten a couple of messages from international gallerists who've been wanting to exhibit Nena Sagil in I think there was a galleries from Mexico and another galleries from London who wanted to assemble works of Nena Sagil for exhibition. Wow, I think with that, it made me think that this artist, I mean, our very own Nena Sagil, has a lot of international appeal. So actually, they still get in touch, but I couldn't like get probably the collector base of Nena Sagil to be able to have a good exhibition for them. But I think I should revisit that inquiry, and perhaps it could help in getting Nena Sagil to be exhibited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, Bambina, weren't you an authority on Nena Sagil? Did you write a definitive article on her or something?
I actually have to look for it. I think Eric Torres is the authority, not me. Huh? But
yeah,
no,
but you wrote an article that's famous.
I knew her in Paris when I was there, and she was actually delightful. She's very eccentric, but yeah. And even then I didn't have the appreciation of her work as I have now. I mean, you know, you're in Paris and you're the last thing you want. You're studying art history. The last thing you want to immerse yourself in is a Filipino artist, which is probably my own naivete, right? But last thing you want to immerse yourself in is a Filipino artist in Paris when you want to discover everything else that, you know, Paris has to offer in terms of art. So my loss, really. But yeah, as Ken says, you know, Nena is as good as Kusama, and that Nena Aguilar's global appeal.
I just saw a comment from Ken, and one of his great discoveries is Leo Valedor, who Leon in the art fair showed as well. And yes, I agree. Leo Valedor is on a cusp, and he's recognized by SF MoMA among others, no, and so many. But
and the Whitney Museum.
The Whitney Museum, but the curator in SF MoMA just died, diba? During COVID.
No? Oh my, really?
Yeah, he was a friend of Ken's as well. But yeah, Leo Valedor was a Filipino-American, but I don't think he ever came here. But his work is definitely very cutting edge, but at the same time, there's some Filipino aspects. And Ken and he resigned, pala. Ken just corrected me. There's someone else who died. I'm sorry. Anyway, but he and Jaime have been doing a lot to promote Leo Valedor, and yes, I definitely think he's someone that we should look at.
And then the other one we were talking about was Hoya, who could have been our Zawuki, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And Hoya, as you say, Hoya's gaining in value, right? I mean, he's finally getting his due. And yes, Ken, I agree, Hoya is world class.
Right.
But for us, you know, when you grow up and you see Hoyas everywhere, I mean, because he was quite the rage at you know, at the 70s, 80s, whatever, people collecting. It's what you see, and you, without that exposure actually, and without that like scholarship, you don't actually realize, you know, how good he is when you put him, you know, when you compare him with other artists from the same era. So yeah, I mean, I agree. Even for someone who appreciates art, I think the exposure as well is really important to international shows and international artists. It's not just for the artist, but also for the buyer or even from the level of art appreciation, I think.
Right, that's very true.
So I think, shall we close now? Do you have any final words? Before we close, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here with us. Also, special shout out to Lisa Nakpil, who helped also put this together. We hope we can bring you a whole series of talks again with Leon and with Toñico and Jaime. And Lisa, you should join us again you should join us next time. And
I think
just
Lisa should do the PAG. She should do the Philippine Art Gallery talk with Jaime.
Art Gallery, yeah, you should do that, definitely. Manila House is open for dining at 50% capacity according to IATF rules. We have a new bar inside and outside, looks spectacular. Please come, and we hope to see you there. We hope to have shows very soon. And before I close, I want to thank you. I want to thank our two speakers, Toñico Manahan and Jaime Ponce de León. And Toñico, Jaime, would you like to say some last words before we say goodbye?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Bambina, for getting us here. And this has been also a great opportunity to interact with a lot of our collectors and audience. And I'd like to invite everybody to please drop by to see the pieces that we have for the auction this Saturday. The auction will be at 2 p.m. So if you couldn't come physically for the auction, everybody can bid through online, www.leonexchange.com, or you may arrange for a phone bid by getting in touch with us and identifying the lot numbers. So,
Jaime, this is a question I always ask you. What's the minimum you should have if you're going to bid at Leon Gallery for work?
You know, I always tell people interested parties to try. If they want something, they could probably just even get it at the opening bid. I mean, you know, auctions is also a game of luck. And it's not always that you end up paying more, but sometimes you also get lucky. There are also a lot of good deals at auction, and a lot of our friends can attest to that. So if you want something, just try. You could probably just get it at the opening bid.
FB Concepcion.
Yeah, but unfortunately we have none now. In the next sale, for sure.
I'm gonna say something at that length, no, because I'm usually in the room during a León auction, and I've been fortunate enough to win certain pieces at opening bid because of some technical difficulty on the side of the person calling in or whatever. No, especially since we live in a country with bad internet, there's a large chance that you might get something at opening bid now. Okay, so I think that I'm actually in the auction room right now, and while we were talking, a lot of collectors would come in and out because I have to say these pieces that Jaime have on preview are spectacular, and as much as his walkthrough is great, they should be seen in person, and you have until Friday to see them in person. And if you're bored, just go and bid. There are so many spectacular things, but set an appointment with Jaime because we all follow all protocols. But if you can, it's like being in the last day of a museum. Please visit.
I agree with you. Jaime is one of the most generous people in the art world in Manila, and always has time for you and time for your questions. And Jaime, I think he appreciates inquiring minds.
Thank you, Bambina.
Thank you. Thank you, Bambina.
Well, thank you.
You're doing a great job with Manila House.
Oh, thanks. And see you all at Manila House soon.
See you.
Yes,
See you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
Care.
We've got something on next Wednesday, as the 23rd at 3 p.m. We have something on adventure travel with A2A Safaris, about the future of adventure travel. So if you'd like to join us, please join us next week at 3 p.m. Okay, thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Okay, bye.
Thank you.